Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am here today. I've got a great episode today. I've got a interview with Kevin Cook about his book, Tiger Slam, which goes into detail about the 2000-2001 seasons of Tiger Woods and his remarkable feat. I think sometimes we forget about all the remarkable Tiger feats, but winning 4 majors in a row is, when you just start to think about like the feasibility of doing this, completely ridiculous. Like this would not happen today. I don't think it will. And there are so many Tiger records that are seemingly untouchable and unfathomable in today's modern era of golf. So we talk with Kevin Cook about that. Also, this is a big episode. Garrett Morrison, former co-host of this podcast, his new podcast, Designing Golf, launches this week. So Garrett put together 3 episodes. So if you go over, check out his feed, Designing Golf, there are 3 episodes. To make it easy, to give you guys a little bit of a flavor of what Garrett's podcast is going to be like, we have his episode with Geoff Ogilvy in this podcast today. So that will be the lead segment of this podcast is Garrett's interview with Geoff Ogilvy. It happened while he was in Australia this winter, and they talk about the 4 courses that most influenced Geoff Ogilvy. So really fun conversation, and gives you a little flavor of his podcast. So there are 3 episodes in there. I'm on one of them. PJ, our producer, is on the other, and that podcast will roll out once every 2 weeks. So that's Garrett's feed. Go subscribe on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, so you never miss one of those episodes, and you'll get a flavor of that in a few minutes. First, I was going to talk a little bit about my on the ground TGL thoughts, just some general TGL thoughts. Brendan, myself, and PJ were there. We're going to have a full breakdown on the shotgun start of going. Just a couple thoughts on TGL. We're 4 weeks in, and I think I think it's been a mixed bag. I think it's really hard to just launch a product, a brand new version of a sport, to an audience of 1 million plus people on ESPN. You know, usually the way things get on ESPN is that they build a fan base over time, and then ESPN looks at it and it's like, wow, that's really interesting. Let's try that. Obviously, you have the basis of golf, and the reason that this is on ESPN really is you have Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods behind this, the 2 biggest names in sport. So you have this kind of new concept, and there have been kinks. It's not been perfect, but this is like any new product. Like, you have to work out the kinks, and they have the tough task of working this out in front of 1 million people. So I was in attendance last night, which was Monday. That was the Jupiter Lynx versus Boston Common match. I kind of went in as a fan. I did not go and do the media, the typical media thing. I wanted to see what it was like to be a fan. Honestly, I had a good time. I know the ticket prices are really expensive. I don't necessarily think it's like a great ticket value, but I thought it was actually easier to follow. It made more sense in person than on television. And I kind of thought it was going to be the opposite, because in the arena, you don't get the banter. You don't get the mic'd up players. You can't hear them. Like, it's not like they're on a speaker in there, but I could see everything. And it just, I think, like, overarching, my big takeaway from going to see it in person, the broadcast is really doing this product no help. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, there were a lot of cool features. There's a lot of data that you can see when you're in person. One of the things I liked the most about it is they have like the hole laid out on a big screen next to the simulator, and you can see exactly the line a player's taking. And it's like little things like this the broadcast isn't showing, and it just helps you understand what's going on. It's something that you don't really get in regular golf, right? Like there's no other version of golf where I can actually see exactly where Tiger Woods is aiming and where the ball goes. Like I think that's a really interesting thing even for a common fan, and it's really cool when they hit it a little offline, or you can see exactly where they're aiming on a shot into the green. So anyways, I think like just in general, my big overarching thought is the broadcast really needs to improve. And it's, again, this has never been done before. This is a tall task. You have to figure it out. To me, it just seems like there's way too much stuff in the broadcast and too little emphasis and attention on making sure that we cover the sport. In this case, it's a maybe a little bit of a leap to call this a sport, but there's too little emphasis on explaining what's happening in the game, which is why somebody's going to tune in to watch this thing is the game. I don't think anybody's going to tune in to hear some corny banter between Tom Kim and Cam Young, when NYGC squares off against Jupe Links. I don't think anybody's tuning in for that. At the end of the day, people are tuning in to watch these superstars play golf, to hit golf shots. So that's got to be the focus of the broadcast. And I rewatched the broadcast when I got home. It's just a night and day difference. And I thought watching it there really, and obviously it was a competitive match. I think that's one of the other things. That's another big takeaway that we can get to right now is like, when the matches are competitive, it's obviously a lot better. And this is with any sport. Nobody likes watching the clock run out on a 30-point deficit in college basketball. That's a painful last 10 minutes of a college basketball game. And the TGL, frankly, for the first 3 weeks was uncompetitive. They were just blowouts. Now, are we going to see more blowouts or more close matches? I think, Jupe Links clearly played much better than they did when they got like completely blown out to water in the second week. And that close match made it really exciting. I think there is like a genuine excitement of watching Tiger and Rory play one hole against each other. We don't get to see superstars square off. And that's one of the things I'm wondering about with this is, what are when we look at this at the end of this year, what are the best things about the league? To me, one of the best things about the league is you can see these superstars match up. Now, my question would be, would it be better as if the back half of it's like a 3-hole match with 2 players and then, a 2-man alternate shot for 3 holes or something, thinking about a little outside the box of just singles. Because I think the singles section has been a little dragging. And the biggest appeal of this, I think, would be seeing a 3-hole match between Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods after they play their triples format, that alternate shot format. I think people would be super into that. And could you imagine like a 3-hole match with Rory and Tiger? The last 3 holes are between the top players. And that's what's settling last night's match. Not, the way the formatting worked out, it was Keegan Bradley versus Tom Kim on the last hole. So I think there's just some small things. In terms of like the gameplay, the golf holes, I've been pleasantly surprised with some of the ways the golf holes have played out. I'm not like a huge fan of many of them. I think we had Augie Pisa on here a couple weeks ago. I think he really understood what the idea of virtual golf holes can be. But I mean, Adam Scott talked about it. There are some hard approaches. This is one of the things that this league can do that frankly, real golf courses can't do anymore because of equipment. Is these golf courses can put long irons into players' hands. I think the biggest thing that they, from the golf course and gameplay standpoint, outside of like formatting, that they really need to hone in on is that the green is whack. I mean, it is not good. I think the undulations need to be reworked for the next year. It's very, very severe. If you were playing this green in real life, you'd be like, holy shit, this is completely overcooked. And so that just, the fixed nature of it with the bunkers, like it can't move right or left. For those that haven't watched this, they have like a fixed green and you play into the green from inside like 40 yards. You're basically just chipping around this green. But like the green is so severe, it doesn't allow for differentiation. I think if the green, and they have like movable jacks that can change slopes, but the sections are so severe that watching it in person, I was like, wait, is this green even moving? On the telecast, you can't see it, but like apparently it is. So like from my perspective, I actually think that if you went way flatter on the green, it would very much improve the gameplay because you could use those jacks to make really varied contours. Right now, there are like 3 really distinct sections because the slope is so big. But if you flattened it a little, then you could get that kind of ripply, potato chippy contours where you could make waves and contours in all different spots. So that's another takeaway. I think that week 4 was a big, like after week 3, it kind of was like, where's this going? I think the biggest question in the room is how long of a leash does this have? I think if we have more nights like last night, where it was really exciting, came down to the wire, I think there is a real potential here. I think the last thing to hit on is that it is appealing to a younger generation, which is something that golf has tried to do for years. But the leash question, how long does ESPN have patience? How long will they continue to put it on primetime television? Because that's the big win here for golf, is that it's primetime television during the week, in the winter, a time when people are home and sitting inside and are looking for something to watch. So I think this is overall there are a lot. It's a divisive topic, TGL. I think there's a lot of things that you can criticize about what they're doing, but there are also a lot of things that we should be hoping for work out, because it is a great platform opportunity for golf to appeal to a new demographic and reach new fans. So yeah, I think, the big thing for me is the broadcast has to get better, but where it's being broadcasted and the time it's being broadcasted is probably the best placement golf's ever had. All right, for YouTube audience, we won't have the Geoff interview in here. It's going to be on YouTube tomorrow. It's on this channel, so we didn't want to confuse you guys. We're going to kick this straight to Kevin Cook with all of his Tiger anecdotes. So look out for the Geoff Garrett interview tomorrow on YouTube. And thanks for listening to the pod. All right, Kevin, thanks for joining us to talk about your newish book. It's new. It's within 6 months of coming out, so it's very new.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. The Tiger Slam, the inside story of the greatest golf ever played. It focuses on the Tiger Slam, which was 2000 to 2001. I, as someone who was, I guess in my falling in love with golf stage of life at this period of time, I was shocked to think about how it was 25 years ago this summer.
Me too. Yeah, it's amazing that it's been that long, and I think partly because it was so vivid at the time.
Yeah, in so many of these memories, as I read through the book, and you do a great job of like hitting all the high points in there. So many of them are still such vivid memories because, as the title suggests, it might have been the greatest golf ever played.
I really think that it was, before or since. I mean, and I think as you well remember, there was talk when Tiger was playing well. Well, he didn't have the competition that Jack Nicklaus had. He didn't have Trevino and Watson and Weiskopf and everyone else chasing him. And I never bought that. I believe that the fields were deeper when Tiger was playing than when Jack Nicklaus was playing. And I think it must be true that the fields are deeper today than they were 25 years ago. At the same time, I still don't think that we've seen the game of golf played better than Tiger did it in 2000 and 2001.
Yeah, it's so hard to compare generations. And every single sport has this struggle. A lot of people would say this is the deepest golf that golf has ever been right now, and you're seeing it with young kids. But I think like the other fascinating thing, and I was really, really pleased to see this be an early chapter in the book. The kind of fascinating aspect of this moment in time was that we began to see this was really the start of a massive technological shift in the game. And I think like an interesting topic, and I think we could talk about that later. But is the solid core golf ball and Tiger's switch to the solid core golf ball at the beginning of 2000 is a fascinating thing. And then where the solid core golf ball and the driver heads have gotten us to this point, is that part of why golf is so deep now, is that the equipment might not, throw out the less skilled as much,
Well, yes, that's a good point, that it may even things at the very highest level of the game. And of course, we could talk about persimmon and gutta percha in the same terms, but that's a long conversation.
I would love to understand, obviously, anytime someone goes into the pursuit of writing a book, there needs to be a why. So obviously, one of the whys is that this was an epic, unrivaled run of golf that the world has never seen. But what were the other whys of writing this book now?
I think the first why for me was the surprise that it had been 25 years. In this transformative time that really, I think, brought so many millions of new golfers to the game because of the celebrity, the charisma of this player who dominated the game in 2000 and 2001. But the other, and to me, the biggest why, is that I think it's underappreciated, even by golf people. We can get into good discussions of, well, is this the greatest feat in golf history? I believe it is. I believe it's ahead of Bobby Jones in 1930, the Byron Nelson's streak. Hogan in 1953 was an astounding performance. Jack Nicklaus's whole career. But I think the Tiger Slam is the best feat in golf history. And the more that I thought about it, the more I think that it's the best feat in sports history. And I've talked to some Joe DiMaggio fans, and we butted heads about that, but I can go into that as well. I think there are a couple of asterisks to Joe DiMaggio, to Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. I think Tiger's Slam surpasses them all.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you boil it down, golf's such a unique sport, right? And to win those 4 tournaments in a row, now, like the technicality of it not being in the same year, the fact they finished 5th in the Masters in 2000, but when you boil it down to beating, a field of 90-ish at the Masters, a field of 156 at the U.S. Open, 156 at the Open, and 150 and 156 or whatever at the PGA. When you boil it down of like, what is that statistical number is insane when you contemplate like 4 events of beating, 90 to 156 of the best players in the world, and doing it so often in such dominant fashion.
That's totally right. And Justin Ray, whom I see as the best stats guru in the game, calls it incomprehensible. And I really think it's true. I mean, I think we can flip coins, wonder about, will there ever be another player to win 4 majors in a row? I'd be surprised. But I can bet you that there's never going to be anybody who wins another U.S. Open by 15 shots. That is just beyond what's capable, even before that point or since that point in the game. And then to follow up with 3 more, I think it was really interesting that Earl Woods himself, Tiger's dad, when this was going on, said, well, I'm a purist. To me, you got to win them all in a calendar year. Reporters ran to Tiger, of course, and Tiger said, I think if you can put them all on your coffee table at the same time, that's a slam. I'm with him, and I think that at the Masters in 2001, when he makes a long putt, because he always ended properly, he always ended tremendously with some supreme effort, that Jim Nantz addressed that by saying, as grand as it gets. He called it as grand as it gets, and I think he was right about that.
Yeah, what you hit on is like his sense of the moment, and I think like when you talk about the greatest athletes ever, I can't think of one that didn't seem to have that sense of the moment when the chips are down.
Yes.
Any sport, you think about what's happening right now with Patrick Mahomes. If
right?
you are. It feels like if you are a team that's going against Patrick Mahomes, if you hold a lead in a 1-score lead
right.
with 6 minutes to go, the only way you are winning that game is if you can hold on to the ball for 6 minutes, because if you give the ball back, it's over. And with Tiger, I think like you hear this from players that played in his generation, is that if he was around on the weekend, there was an air of inevitability, and you watched some of the greatest players of generations just crumble around him. But then a part of how that happened was the ability to rise to the occasion. And really, the book starts. You start at the beginning of 2000 with Kapalua, one of the all-time great duels between two great players. Of this, we'll call it a modern generation. Everybody that was a golf fan in that time remembers Ernie Els and Tiger going back and forth at Kapalua. And sure enough, it was one of the many times that Tiger just seemingly crushed Ernie Els' spirits.
And everybody else's, yes. And I think, suppose Tiger had not taken up the game. Suppose Earl Woods had not been stationed in Brooklyn, right across the street from Dyker Beach Golf Course, and then we'd be talking about the era of Mickelson and Els. But I think it's absolutely true that like Mahomes, who has a potential three-peat coming up, like Brady was the same way. You better not let him touch the ball with a minute left, or you're going to lose the game. Like Jordan, and what motivates them is very significant to me. And at Pebble, on the last day, the tournament is over in 2000. Tiger is lapping the field, and he motivated himself on Sunday by saying, "I'm not making a bogey today." And he comes all the way around. He's almost 3 putts at 18, and he's so annoyed at himself because, as he put it later, I'm going to ruin the day. Oh, he might only win the U.S. Open by 14 shots. But what drives him is to do something that is as near perfection as he can do. And that's one thing. I do believe that the Tiger Slam is underappreciated. I also think that in some ways, even Tiger Woods is underappreciated because we remember his talent. We remember the fitness that he brought to the game. But I think he's the best grinder who ever lived.
Yeah, I mean, you think about just the made cut streak.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many things that you can talk about with Tiger. I think like one of the stats that illuminated, and I wish I had it handy. Now that we have this strokes gained data, there's Justin Ray, I think, is the one that found this originally. There's some absurd amount of rounds in a row that he had positive strokes gained, which means like, and I know like strokes gained can make some people's eyes glaze over, but strokes gained means that he is performing at an above average, where when you're positive, you are better than half the field on a day. And just the sheer number of days, like golf is such a fickle game. And I think this is like the thing about the Tiger Slam and just Tiger in general, what you illuminated, underappreciated for being a grinder, the made cut streak, the strokes gained streak, the Tiger Slam, all of these things and anybody that plays golf can understand this, can be undone so easily with just surely a bad bounce.
Yes.
We see this on Sunday of tournaments all the time. I'm always amazed by, like, if you're watching the golf closely, how one person around the lead might get a bad break. Another person around the lead might get like bounce off a fan as opposed to going in a hazard. And you like just write it down. It's like, oh, and the guy won by one.
Mm.
And the guy that went into the water or got a bad bounce lost. And I think, like, when you talk about the successive nature of winning all four of those majors in a row, the sheer fact that he played a level of golf where, you know, there had to be untimely breaks in that. There were untimely breaks, but he still won. And one of the reasons is just he had this capability. I mean, I believe five of his wins in majors, or maybe 6 of his wins in majors, he entered Sunday with a 3-shot lead or more. And in this streak, like, how you do this streak, and I think, like, you couldn't do the 4 majors in a row with 4 close majors. One of the things that he had the supreme skill of, and you hit on it, like, I'm not going to make a bogey on the last day. Like, this will to continue. He never took his foot off the gas, you know? And by blowing 2 fields out, it makes this so much more feasible because it limits your risk of a bad break here or a bad break there costing you one tournament. You know, you look back on, like, Jordan Spieth probably was the closest person to do this since Tiger. Mm-hmm. And he had the Open and the Whistling Straight. You know, like, he's probably the closest person since. But he, you know, he had one blowout, one close one they won, and then he lost 2 other close ones, you know? I think it's just, I guess you've done all this research. You've looked into it. What's a couple things that, like, your favorite things that you uncovered about Tiger during this period of writing this book?
There are so many. The fact, I mean, we talk about his dominance at Pebble. He made a triple at Pebble. And what did he do immediately afterward? Okay, now I have a new mission today. I'm going to get back to even. And that's the first step to what becomes a 15-shot win. But while I was working on the book, I mean, not only the utter dominance and dominance to a degree that, as you alluded to, it almost insulates you from getting beat. You are so much better than everybody else, except at Valhalla, where Bob May is going to take him right into a playoff. It's going to give Tiger all he wants more than anybody else in this period. This guy comes out of nowhere, but not nowhere to Tiger, because he was a junior star before Tiger and Phil. But there were also personal things. I was very surprised to find out that 3 days after Tiger wraps up the U.S. Open at Pebble, his 3rd major, that Wednesday, he shows up in Henderson, Nevada, at a qualifier for the Publinks, for the U.S. Amateur Publinks. Why? To caddy for his buddy Jerry Chang. And now he doesn't want to make everybody's all autograph seekers racing after him. So he doesn't meet Jerry Chang on the first tee. He goes to the second hole, waits around where he can just kind of slip out. It's blazing heat, and Jerry Chang has the best golfer in the world of all time as his caddy for the rest of the day. He didn't even make the public links that year, but for that day, he had Tiger Woods as his caddy, and that's a heck of a distinction.
It's it does make you lament social media, because that type of thing would never be able to happen.
Oh, true. We
today.
would all know about it. Yes.
It's like Charlie Woods can't even go play a qualifier. He's entering tournaments as under pseudonyms because of this. You know, Tony Romo enters tournaments under fake names sometimes because of this. And it's, you know, one of the proliferations of the internet and social media is like, this couldn't happen anymore, you know?
That's right, and it's too bad. We need a social media jammer that you could carry around so that nobody could see you from hundreds of miles around.
I would have loved. I would have loved to hear about the other players in the group that day, and like I imagine
What's your caddy think about this?
You get done with the first hole. I'd be so nervous if I was one of the other players. It's like all of a sudden Tiger Woods showed up.
Yes, and Tiger's raking the bunker. Oh, not bad.
In the research, was there a particular, outside the PGA, was there a particular tournament that really stood out to you as an impressive win? It maybe not even a major.
Actually, I was so focused on the majors because to me, that is his goal. And while he never really admitted it publicly, he admitted it privately from before the Tiger Slam, that the number in his head was 18, and he was going for more than that he's looking for more majors than Jack won. But the Valhalla PGA was an astounding, remarkable drama. But of the tournaments that I really focused on, the 2001 Masters was a fabulous drama too. To have him, it just happens that day, he's going to go up against his two best rivals, two guys who could beat Tiger, who can foil the Tiger Slam, two guys that he thinks are capable of beating him, although he thought that more of David Duval than he did of Phil Mickelson. And it does wind up with a very dramatic moment with Phil, where Tiger slams the 3-wood around a corner at 13 and has a moment in which Phil Mickelson, who was pointedly not watching his swing, and this makes sense to me. You're playing with Tiger Woods on Sunday, don't watch him swing. It's going to make you think bad thoughts. So Phil is looking away the whole day, but the crowd goes nuts. Phil has bopped a driver with a nice big fade around the corner, and then Tiger hits his 3-wood past him, and Tiger would practice that shot all winter, again and again and again. This is the drive at 13. Tiger knocks a 3-wood past Phil's drive, and Phil hears the crowd go crazy, looks at where the ball is, and says, "Do you always hit your 3-wood that far?" And then that Tiger is going to lay it on thick at that point, and he says, "No, sometimes farther."
Amazing moment.
It just goes on and on. There were so many dramatic moments in these majors.
I think that 2001 Masters, it has to be one of the most popular of the YouTube final rounds. And I mean, I think like you could probably make an argument that was the most thrilling in terms of big time storylines of any of the Tiger wins in majors. Maybe outside 2019, just the sheer comeback aspect of that. But when you look at on the back nine on Sunday, you've got Woods, Duval, Phil. Ernie never really factored, but he was only 3 back going into the day. But where you have Tiger and David Duval deadlocked at 15 under on through 15 holes, right? Like a neck and neck, and at a time where you kind of felt like this thing could go any way. And so many of Tiger's great moments in majors are the Bob May, the Rich Beam, those moments against these smaller names. This one was really the showdown of the Giants with Phil, Duval, and Tiger going at it.
It truly was. And then Duval hits a ball at 16 that he thought was perfect, that he thought that ball might be an ace. But even at that level, it's striking to me that even at that level, because I'll hit a 7-iron, and if I get it like 80% okay, that's a pretty good shot. And then every once in a while, you hit one just right and you're 20 yards over the green. Even at that level, David Duval could hit one too pure, and it carries over the flag to a horrendous spot. And then David Duval heroically hits a magnificent, incredibly delicate little chip, but he doesn't make a putt. And what that Masters came down to, as often happened, Phil didn't make the putts down the stretch that day either. Tiger did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's that kind of quality we talked about, like always knowing what you have to do in the moment. I thought, an interesting undertone of all the season, and I think one of the stories is that story you hit on with Marco Mira, the Strata, and Tiger Woods chipping. Marco Mira chipping, and what it led to. Well, maybe go a little bit into detail about the golf ball, and what that how that changed the way Tiger could play golf.
It really changes everything, and that's another thing that I think it's easy to forget 25 years later, that we used to play golf balls that have got a little cover over a whole bunch of wound up rubber bands. That sounds fairly primitive. Marco Mira happened to be playing a top flight Strata, and they're knocking balls around, and O'Meara's balls performing, just checking up just right, like it's on a string. And Tiger says to him, because they're always practicing together, Tiger says, how are you making a ball do that? And O'Meara, who is one of the people who can needle him, says, don't worry about it, T. It's something that takes maturity and practice. And then pretty soon, Tiger hits one of those Stratas, and it behaves just the way that O'Meara's balls were. And he says, it's not you, it's the ball. Now, he is determined enough. One thing I've said about Tiger, I truly believe that this is a guy who took an engineer's approach to his game. He wants to put it together like a NASA mission so that every component is correct. He is willing, and he's been practicing developing this ball we saw the Nike ball. It's just got the nice swoosh on it, but it's made by Bridgestone, and it is similar to that Strata, a little bit better. He tried dozens and dozens of prototypes. And Rock Ishii, who was the designer for Bridgestone, said he had never met anyone with such touch, with such feel, who could evaluate contact by the sound of it. That you'd slip in a different kind of ball just to test him, and he'd say, "What that one? It felt like a rock." He developed the ball that worked for him and was daring enough to put it in play in competition at a time when none of the other top players were using a ball like that. He then, of course, starts to win with it by enormous margins. And it's only a little bit later that year when Phil Mickelson, who was a Titleist player, and other players are saying, well, geez, this is a miracle ball that this guy is using. It's not solely talent, maybe. Maybe the ball is useful. And ask Titleist, hey, Titleist, have you got anything in the works that might be similar to that ball? Oh, well, in fact, Titleist had been developing a ball for months and months, even years. But if you're Titleist, you don't need to hurry up to bring out a new ball. Everybody's already playing your ball. But that led them to ramp up development of a ball that comes out that very same year, and this is often forgotten, that very same fall, the Pro V1 is introduced. Pretty soon, everybody is playing that ball, and the whole game of golf has changed forever.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of a underpin of the whole thing, is that, like, it's just the sort. Tiger's a Titleist athlete. Yes. He's a Titleist ball player at this point.
He's a Nike apparel wearer.
Yeah, but he's a Titleist sponsored player at the start of the 2000 season, and he's playing a professional 90. And I loved how the lead of the book really, he's teeing off at Kapalua with a professional 90, right? And one of the things that, one of the reasons that Nike got Tiger on the ball contract that you alluded to is that Titleist likes to spread the money around. They still do. They're, one of their big metrics as a marketing thing is to have the highest number of players playing Titleist balls. So in order to do that, you cannot focus on backing up the Brinks truck for one athlete, right? Like, you need to have the capital spread around and, the amount of dollars. But anyways, for 9 months of this run of golf, Tiger is playing a far superior golf ball than the vast majority of the tour, who are all sponsored by the company he left.
Yes, and that plays into the funniest thing that happened during the Tiger Slam is when he almost runs out of balls at Pebble. after the Friday round is called on account of weather, and Steve Williams neglects to check how many balls, and Tiger was putting balls in the lodge at Pebble at night. They didn't have very many. Well, once he bangs one halfway to Hawaii at 18, Steve realizes there are only so many of these balls that were called the Nike Tour accuracy in the whole world. Generally, you can take a penalty. You can get it if it's the same ball from another player. You could run off to the pro shop and buy some new Titleist. Can't do that with this ball that's not even available to the public yet. So it leads to the crazy moment in which Tiger finishes his weather postponed round with the last ball in his bag, and that was something that he didn't even realize at the time.
I think like one of the interesting things you touched on was what Tiger gained from the tour accuracy from the professional, particularly with the driver.
Yes, and it doesn't balloon in the wind, as players say. The wind affects this ball less, and this is pure technology. That the ball still spins properly at wedge velocities, but you hit it with a driver, and it moves. And it's just purely, it has an awful lot to do with the wind. It moves only about half as much in the wind as the previous ball. Well, that's a big advantage if you're as technically proficient as this player is. And to give him that advantage when he's already better than everybody else, the next thing you're going to see is sheer dominance by the player who has made every facet of his game the best that had ever been seen to that point.
Yeah, it was fascinating how the tournaments leading up to the ball switch were like close calls. They were tournaments that actually went against Tiger. What was his first result with the ball, and where did he put it in play?
He played it at the Byron Nelson, and no, he didn't play it. He actually played the last tournament with the other ball was at the Byron Nelson. Thought he would have won by 5. He's got the new ball, and before he wants to play it, he's going to hit shots that Butch Harmon described as inappropriate to the situation, because he's playing the Western Open in your hometown, and he's hitting balls as if he were on the old course at St. Andrews. Why? Well, because as he put it, and I thought this was quite revealing, he says you could hit 10 million balls on the range. It's never the same as in competition. So he's hitting stingers that have nothing to do with the hole he's playing in the Western Open, because he's imagining what he's going to do once he gets to the old course, where his real preparation will be as furious as can possibly be. But now this new ball he gains confidence in it as he prepares to win majors.
Yeah. Well, everybody should check out your book. What's the best way to buy it for you?
Well, it's at Amazon.
Okay.
And your neighborhood independent bookstore is always a good place to go.
Okay. How can people find you? You're on Twitter?
I'm not. They can find me on LinkedIn or write me a letter. Or stone tablets work too, but or they can watch the Fried Egg and maybe we'll get together again one of these days.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Congratulations on the book. A really, really fun read. And just amazing memories. Documenting maybe the greatest run of golf we'll ever see ever. So, thank you.
That's right. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. Big thanks to PJ Clark for editing and producing this. PJ's working hard down here in the swamp. He's down in Jupiter. Just played a round of golf. He's having to produce 2 podcasts tonight. To have the spirit of a mid-20 something. The spirit and energy of a mid-20 something. So we will be back next week with a new edition of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and hope you guys go check out the rest of Garrett's Designing Golf podcasts.